listening to 910 AM Superstation.
The best in the city.
The future of radio. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media. WFDF Farmington Hills, Detroit. 910 AM Superstation, a division of Adele Media.
Good morning. We're midway through the week, more than halfway through the month, and 80% through the year. But at least it's not snowing yet. Welcome back to 910 AM. I'm Jack Lessenberry, and we're going to examine two slightly different views of life in the D today, one grounded in reality and the other one maybe not. First of all, if you look online for the definition of talented multimedia maven, you might well find the name Todd Krieger. He's a photographer, artist, and film. Dave Krieger. Why not Todd? We'll have Todd in later. No, Dave Krieger. He's a photographer, artist, and film producer, and a very talented writer whose works include 2 books in which he did both the writing and the photography. Things I Do in Detroit, a guide to the coolest places by the Nain Rouge, and also Things People Say About Detroit, a collection of quotes as told to the Nain Rouge. He'll be reading from and talking about both of them this Sunday at the Detroit Public Library as part of their author series. So, Dave, by the way, I don't get names right before 9:30. Right. The only thing I'm a little shaky on is whether you are A, really the Nain Rouge, that little mischievous red dwarf who was here in Cadillac arrived, or B, channel him as if you were possessed, or C, just talk to him a lot.
He's a friend of mine.
He's a friend of yours.
Yeah, I met him years and years ago when I was running around downtown.
He's even got his campaign button on. I like that.
Yeah, represent.
So, but you know, this is a long time myth, right? Or it's a long time, whether it's a myth or not. The legend is that.
Well, he is a legend.
He is a legend. Now, if I get it right, correct me if I'm wrong. That he was here and Cadillac or his men in some way abused him.
Well, yeah, there's a number of stories that follow him. The original 18th century French folklore stories, or sort of passed down, and were printed in the 1800s. Describe him as Cadillac being an ass. Pardon me.
Right.
Ass
is acceptable. The full version is not.
Okay. Yeah. So the Nain Rouge was basically was tormented by Cadillac's pompousness and was hit with his cane one time, and he was warned by a fortune teller not to mess with the Nain Rouge when he got to Detroit.
Right.
And he did, and then he ended up having to leave Detroit in disgrace and fell into bankruptcy. His sons fell into bankruptcy. And
what were his last words? Something like "Detroit ruined me."
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the main things. And then in 1763, a British soldier saw him following him around for 3 or 4 days.
Right.
During the Pontiac siege, and he was killed in Elmwood Cemetery, basically at Parents Creek. And
the soldier was killed?
The soldier was killed, yeah.
Right.
Also, they saw him running from St. Anne's Church when it first burned down 3 months after establishing Fort Detroit.
Okay.
So, and then in 1805, they saw him in the stables when the fire tore down the city, burned the entire city down. And some people say they saw him in 67, the riots, and 76, pulling out some power cords during a winter snowstorm. But some guy who's here for 315 years.
Right. Well, I think I saw him at a Trump rally.
Never. Well, if you did, he would probably be the malicious, malevolent guy there.
Yep.
Anybody who's in Detroit for 315 years is either serving a lot.
It has an effect.
Yeah, so you're serving time, or you love it.
Well, you know, I never heard of him growing up, but I'm glad in recent years there's sort of been a revival, right? There's other events around the neighborhood.
I learned about him when I was like 9 years old in Elmwood Cemetery from my father, who cannot remember telling me this story.
Wow.
So it's an interesting thing. When I moved back from New York, I was looking for a project to work in Detroit and do something creative in Detroit, and then all these ruin porn books popped up.
Right.
Detroit in Decay, and I figured there's 700,000 of us still here.
Right.
It's a viable city, and I have fun here every day.
Right.
So there must be something to do, and to counteract that sort of narrative, and that's why I wrote the book Things I Do in Detroit. That's told to me through the Nain Rouge. It's a sort of guidebook.
And it's a wonderful book for those of you watching in the webcam. I'll hold it up here. It's a wonderful book. And then you got the bigger version, It's a coffee table version.
One's a coffee table photo book, which is the guidebook that tells you
The
100.
things I do. This is the things people say about Detroit.
Yeah, and that's a collection of quotes from all kinds of famous Detroiters.
Wow. But before I forget, you're going to do a reading at the Detroit Public Library.
This Sunday we're gonna do an audio-visual presentation, sort of,
Wow.
and book signing and reading, question and answer. Hopefully, it'll get raucous.
And the price is right.
It's free,
It's free. You have to
absolutely
sign up in
free.
advance.
You can sign up or just pop up to the third floor.
What time?
2:30.
2:30 on Sunday.
Yeah, 2:30 to 4:30 on
That
Sunday.
sounds good. By the way, we're talking to Dave Krieger, who's a cultural maven. He's done all sorts of things. I wanted to talk about his films and other things too. But if you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600. We'd love to have you join the conversation or ask something. And I have to ask you, Dave, what is Detroit to you? I mean, Detroit's gone through all these incarnations. What is it to you? Is it the same place it's always been?
Well, it's. I think it's as hard a city. Like people talk about Pittsburgh being a hard city because of steelworkers. Detroit has had a creative energy, but it's also a hard ass.
Right.
People play hard, they party hard, they work hard, and that ethic and that sort of way of life establishes a personality that Detroit has that nobody else has.
That's exactly right. It's kind of like A.J. O'Neill, who we've had on the show, who's a pioneer trying to rehab Highland Park, comes out with a brand of coffee called Detroit Bold, hard coffee for hard workers.
Yeah,
Coffee, hard
the Detroit Hustles Harder guys, or any number of people who firmly believe in Detroit. I mean, people look at Detroit, and if you go around the world, you're in Paris and you come to Detroit and you see neighborhood after neighborhood destroyed. We're hard to that.
Right.
And we still love it.
They can't kill us, we're still here.
Yeah. But, Detroit has been, a technological center since the 1850s when they started making gas stoves.
That's right.
Or iron stoves. Iron stoves, yeah. And,
they made railroad cars here.
yeah, the Pullmans were here first. And, apparently in Siberia, 10% of the iron stoves that they have in Siberia that they still use are Detroit made.
Wow.
100 years later. That's the thing about Detroit, that it's accessible. Anybody can do almost anything they want. There's a creative freedom here, and the change is coming to return it back to a multicultural, multifaceted, multi-economic
It's already
downtown.
Sure. Anyway, we're talking, by the way, Dave Krieger, the author of Things I Do in Detroit, and Things People Say About Detroit. He's had a fantastic career, and he's an ultimate Detroiter. You were born in the city, 1965?
Right before Christmas, 64, yeah.
Right before Christmas, 64. What a Christmas present.
Yeah, my son was born the same day,
Wow.
30 years later.
You came out, and I think in the same year as the Mustang.
Probably.
That's right. But you know what
I wasn't driving then, I don't know.
When we say Detroit, I was talking to somebody yesterday saying, there's two Detroits. There's a city, but there's also, I don't think you can understand Detroit city out of the context of the metropolitan area. You've got these artificial political boundaries, but we're all Detroit in a way.
Well, the thing is, for a long time, especially when I was living in New York, if you ran into somebody and you told them, I would run into people they would say they're from Royal Oak or Birmingham. But now people say they're from Detroit.
They do.
And there's this, but the people who were from Detroit were always proud to be from Detroit. And then the neighborhood suburb Detroit, city suburb kind of thing, I think is fun, to the wayside.
Right.
But the divisiveness was created by state and federal governments in the first place.
And unscrupulous politicians who, ran against the Brooks Patterson, and to some extent Coleman.
Yeah, but if you
smashed the other side.
You look in the 40s and 50s, FHA loans that were redlining.
Of course they were, right.
Yeah, and so with the bus systems being separated you've created a city that's 135 square miles. It's almost like we used to ghettoize Black Bottom or Harlem was. Now you have Detroit, which is completely ghettoized the entire city.
And certainly that was much, but I think that was much truer 20 years.
30 years ago, yeah.
The boundary that's starting to slip now, and they absolutely need to put the bus system together and have more sort of area transportation. But they're always still conscious of Detroit. People who stuck it out, people who were here.
Yeah, but the economic, the possibilities. We can't have trickle down racial policies where if white people move back here and black people who have been living here start seeing a benefit by being able to get a job as a busboy or dishwasher, they need to be included economically for this to really work and for us to get over this economic divisive challenge.
That's exactly right. The interesting phenomenon is for the last 20 years, you've had essentially no white flight from Detroit. In fact, the whites are sort of coming back. You had black flight.
Well, unfortunately, yeah, between the schools.
Black people want the same thing as white people want. Schools,
absolutely,
safety.
Yeah. Safety in schools. And, when you have the black middle class leave in the last 300,000 people, that cripples the economy.
Yeah, where we're sitting today, our studios are in Southfield, and Southfield soon may have a higher black population than the city of Detroit. And for sensible percentages for the reasons, but it takes time. But Detroit still, if you had to define in a sentence, Dave Krieger, the essence of Detroit, what would it be?
Yeah. Again, I'd have to come back on that one. The essence of Detroit is hard scrabbled, hard lived. The idea of one sentence. Detroit is a creative blank canvas where if you are creative and hardworking, you can make yourself into whoever you want to be.
I think that's the best definition I've heard. 313-778-7600. And yet, when I've had people from out of town or from Europe come to see me, you can take them to places in Detroit that are utterly elegant. I mean, you take somebody to the Guardian building, take somebody to the Fisher building, take somebody to some wonderful condo looking over the Detroit River. They say, this is Detroit, because in the media, they think of it all as looking kind of like Berlin in 1945.
Well, and it does a lot of ways.
In some places.
Or Iraq in 2010.
Iraq in 2010, so you're a young guy, you have more modern disaster references, but still. And tell me the Nain Rouge, your friend, why is he a perfect symbol for this city?
Well, he's one of those kind of people. The Nain Rouge is, in essence, his portrayal is this malevolent character. But I've determined that he's more like the Dos Equis guy. He wears a 5-hole Edwardian 3-piece suit, very well-mannered, very manicured, and eloquent in every way. He knows more than all of us.
Right.
And he's been a behind-the-scenes backer for all the good things. He's worked with Henry Ford, Fred Sanders. He's worked with all these really cool people, helping them create what, in essence, is Detroit.
Right.
Because of his form and his nature as a gnome, he's an outsider. And just like all outsiders, when something goes wrong, it's not the tribe that did it, it's the one who's outside the tribe.
Right.
And so, in essence, he's sort of the representative of everything that happens racially or religiously, the Irish or Hispanics or blacks or homosexuals or Jews. He is that sort of representative of that outsider who, in any caste, would be blamed.
He's an outsider who's always been here. And that's, I think,
so he doesn't take credit for anything that's good.
Right.
But he's always blamed when things go wrong.
Well, I think we ought to resurrect that. Just blame the Nain Rouge. Don't blame Coleman Young.
Well, there's that.
Blame the Nain Rouge. Now, Dave, you've written 2 wonderful books, but tell us about yourself as an artist. I know you've done movies. But give us a little sketch of your background.
Well, my brother and I both grew up in Detroit and went to Cass Tech.
Who's older, you or your brother?
I'm older. I'm about 2 years older than my brother. And most people would consider him, as our art teacher at Cass Tech said to my brother one time, that my brother drew like Michelangelo and I drew like Fred Flintstone. And
Fred Flintstone was in Detroit.
Yeah.
Barney Rubble said was in Detroit.
So I think my brother's one of the most talented people I know in terms of his art, and I'm just trying to play catch up. And my mom used to take him to Cranbrook when he was a kid, do some artwork, and my father was a handyman and woodworker, so he learned axe craft. And my mother, who had been in a wheelchair since we were about 10, would drop us off, and I would go downtown and walk around the museums and stuff. And that sort of grew us into the nature of creativity in Detroit and hard work. And then I started working at the Art Institute as a volunteer, and then became a photographer and shot Andy Warhol when I was 19. And
Wow.
lived in LA and Paris for a few years, and then moved to New York for 12.
What did you do in New York?
I was a photographer and worked on printing for a lot of famous photographers, printing black and white materials for a lot of famous people. And one of my sons is autistic, and then we just felt like it was time to go. I sort of gave up my career there, or my career in essence, for my son, to make sure that he had a better opportunity. So when we moved back here, I started working with a magazine called Model D that was trying to get people to come back to Detroit. Think of it as 14 different Royal Oaks like it used to be.
Right.
And that transferred into working with film. And then I've been doing film work for the last 10 years, doing locations and producing.
Have you been doing your own films? You've been working with...
I've done a few. I've produced a couple films. One's coming out in a week or two called Boo. Ely Barta and I and Luke Jaden.
Is it a Halloween movie?
It's a Halloween scare movie.
Yeah.
And
where can somebody see it?
it doesn't. There's a premiere I just saw yesterday, but I don't know where it is.
Oh, okay. I'd like to be scared by something else other than the politicians.
Well, there's another movie called Cash Only that we produced, Ely and I produced a couple years ago, that the New York Times compared to Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets.
Wow.
And then I've done Superman, Batman, and Ides of March with Clooney, and I was Batman actually in a movie with Sean Penn.
You were Batman?
Yeah, I was Batman.
Wow. So who was Sean Penn?
He was sort of a Rob Smith character from The Cure.
I see. So you've now, can you make a living as an independent artist in Detroit?
Yeah, because it's so cheap to live here. Except, you have to be dedicated. The audience may not be here for you, or you may not realize that it's here.
Right.
It's the hardest part of any artist is trying to identify an audience and then put a value on your work.
Right.
And most people undervalue their work because they want to pay their mortgage, or they're desperate for food if you're a real starving artist. And I think that's the thing that is the biggest challenge for so many artists, and there's so many great ones here, and getting the exposure. There's starting to become a real wave. Chris Turner, who's an artist friend of mine, and I just did a collaboration at the Murals on the Market. 3 screens.
Murals
Video
are really coming back, aren't they?
Well, this whole thing, the Murals on the Market guys, 1X Run and Red Bull, these guys are really dedicated to exposing Detroit artists and art. They invited a lot of other people from around the country to do the murals, but they're proponents of getting more exposure and more artists and some opportunities.
These are the murals we see around town that we see.
Yeah, some of those are Detroiters, some of them are from other town, but the guys who are working here, there's more avenues now opening up for people who are creative and trying to market their work.
Oh, that's encouraging. We're going to come back with more with Dave Krieger after this break. This is Jack Lessenberry on 910 AM, the Superstation. Welcome back to 910 AM. I'm Jack Lessenberry. I'm here with Dave Krieger, artist, writer, actor, cultural everything. And he's going to be speaking at the Detroit Public Library on Sunday about 2 of his books, Things I Do in Detroit and Things People Say About Detroit. He also has a scrapbook he was telling me about. I don't think that's not commercially available yet.
No, that was actually the first book I was writing. And these books are now available at Wayne State Press. And the Wayne State Press editor-in-chief, I proposed the first book, the scrapbook, to her. And she laughed out loud and said she was wonderful, but she didn't want to print the pictures yet. So I'm trying to establish this character a little bit. And
he's your signature character.
Yeah.
Which I really like. Now, the thing you mentioned earlier that you heard the tale of the Native Rouge at Elmwood Cemetery, which is absolutely lush, unbelievably beautiful place. People used to go there for picnics in the 19th century, and almost very few people I've met have ever been there. Everybody from Lewis Cass to Coleman Young are there, and they have these wonderful trees. That's where Parents Creek was put on the ground, but there's still some above ground water.
It's the only area in Detroit that still has some of the natural shapes
Right.
where there's hills and streams and creeks. All of Detroit was this sort of hilly.
Right. It wasn't flat.
No, not at all.
It was really beautiful. Now, I was thinking the people buried there mostly in the 1970s. There's a whole bunch of Civil War people, firefighters that buried in the firefighter section. They believed back then that at the resurrection they'd all pop out of the ground. If that happened, they popped out of the ground now. I think they probably think they were in hell because it'd be noisy and all these awful machines around. These people would be dressed funny. Most of the people that see would be minorities. And, we're in hell. But I guess I have too fertile imagination. But what that reminds me of, there are lots of places in Detroit that hidden treasures, fun places to be, that even people who've lived here all their lives sometimes don't know about. What are some of your favorites?
Well, everybody who reads this book, the picture book, things, or the guidebook to Detroit here, things I do, even the most Detroit file expert, there's always one or two things in here that they have not seen or haven't done. One of the most interesting things is the ice boats. The boats in Scandinavia and Canada, they have these huge World Cup races where they're on ice skates and they sail around on frozen lakes.
Right.
They're a DN class boat. The whole class of those boats is called DN. And the DN stands for the Detroit News. And in the 30s, a couple guys designed these boats that worked at the news, and it exploded into this worldwide sporting event. But it doesn't really, there's a few guys in Detroit that sort of do it. Some of the hidden treasures are, a couple of my friends get bummed out when I start talking about some of them because that means everybody's going to go there.
Right.
The John's Carpet Blues is one of the most magical places on a Sunday afternoon.
What's it called?
John's Carpet Blues.
John's Carpet.
It's just a local picnic where people play rhythm and blues.
Where is it?
It's in the book.
It's crafty.
Then there's like the Redford Theater or
it shows all this is one
kayaking in canoes.
Casablanca and all these.
Yeah. One of the things about Elmwood Cemetery, it's heavily used during the weekend for joggers and people looking for stuff now.
You have the Polish yacht races.
Yeah.
You know about the Polish yacht races? You don't? They get canoes with wheels.
Oh yeah, but a buddy of mine he actually hosts one of those things.
Every day, yeah.
The whole idea of the book was to try and get people to interact with Detroit, and there's an address and a website for every place or everything.
Wow.
And then there's a description from me, and then I've asked the Name Rouge to help tell the story as to why he really digs it.
Now, can you get it on Amazon? That's what everybody says all the time.
Don't shop Amazon. Shop your local bookseller.
Amen. So is it at local bookstores?
It is. There's a few places. MoCad and the Detroit Irish Market have it for sure. Pure sometimes has it. The shops, the shops at Somerset have it. And with Wayne State Press taking over the distribution, I expect it's going to be available in more places.
That's wonderful. How long has it been out?
The Things I Do has been out about 2 years. This will be the second coming up, about a year and a half. And things people say about Detroit, the quote book has only been out roughly 6 months. But
I remember the old quotations of Coleman Young. This is like...
It's expanded on that, but it also gives a little bit of bio and context for what the quotes are about.
Right.
So when...
a famous quote from John Sinclair that I can't read on the air. Kick out the jazz quote.
Well, there's Glenn Fry was... his mom wouldn't let him hang out with Bob Seger because she caught him smoking weed. Right. And so then he went to L.A. and met Don Henley. And then his quote about Detroit is, Detroit, where mother is half a word.
I love it. Tell what's the big, I gather you love this sort of cultivating the sort of tough, Detroit, we're so bad we're from Detroit kind of image, but there's a softer side to the city too.
Well, that's Detroit has that. If you're nice to us, well, we love you. We're really welcoming. We're really gracious people, but you don't F with us.
Right.
Right. Like you don't talk. Detroit has got a pride,
right.
And but we're. I love Detroit. I love running around and meeting new people around here. Everybody is always friendly. When I'm location scouting for a movie, if I knock on a door anywhere in the city or in Holland Park, people welcome you in, and they're excited. They want to show you. They want to show you their life, and you go up to. I was up in Bad Axe, and they called the cops on me.
That's right, your suspicion of walking while
Yeah.
being a Detroiter. 313-778-7600. If you have a cultural memory to share or something you'd like to ask Dave Krieger, we'd welcome hearing from you. What's some of your favorite places in Detroit, especially hidden places? Now, I know you're not a political guy, but what do you think about what's happening now in Detroit? Do you worry about, there's some exciting stuff, do you worry that there's too much gentrification?
When I moved to New York, I wanted that. I wanted Macy's. I wanted Wall Street. I wanted the diversity. I lived above a guy who fought Roosters and was on rent stabilization. And 4 blocks away was Philip Glass, and 5 blocks away was the Hells Angels.
Right.
Detroit.
Maybe the only time Philip Glass and the Hells Angels have been using the same sentence.
Yeah, they probably went to the same block parties.
Probably did.
The idea that Boston Edison and Union Village back in the 20s and 30s,
Right.
you had that diversity of wealth and working class, and we need to get back to that because that you can't ghettoize an entire region and expect Bloomfield Hills to succeed without Detroit.
No.
So you have to have diversity economically, socially, and that fabric when it's woven tight is a beautiful thing. New York after 9/11 was one of the most magical places in the world
right, yeah.
because everybody had a common enemy instead of each other.
Right.
And so if we can get Detroit to become cooperative in any kind of close way like that, where everybody...
Maybe it's Detroit versus everybody t-shirts.
Yeah, kind of like that. The idea of gentrification is essential. I don't... when a lot of my friends who grew up here lament about what the downtown is changing into, but when it's empty, you expect, in your mind, you create these environments that aren't actually real.
Well, I can remember in 1990 you shoot a cannonball downtown.
Yeah,
The expectation of hitting anybody.
Gilbert's done really good things where he's actually fixed the buildings up into the same kind of quality that they were supposed to. But the danger is that he's got 90 buildings, a monopoly of properties downtown, and God forbid, the economic collapse or something happens. It's a tenuous footing.
Right.
So it's not diversity there.
Well,
we need diversity in terms of ownership and
everything in Detroit has always been tenuous. I want to take a call from Dave. Oh, do we lose Dave? Lost Dave. Well, again, if you have a cultural memory to share or question for Dave Krieger, who's a multimedia genius here and expert on Detroit, or you want to make fun of me, call in 313-778-7600. I guess the one thing lacking though in Detroit, Dave, I mean, yeah, we have rich people living here. We have, more impoverished people, but we need a middle class in the city.
Well, yeah, the theory is that a lot of these, and we still have the population depletion.
Right.
So people who have been living here are either moving or dying off, or in different ways.
I think it's about stop, but it's
just like 5,000 last year, but it was it was 10,000 a month 5 years ago or something. So now it's a few thousand a year. The thing that was always stabilized and we don't recognize, the immigrant population in Southwest Detroit has been one of the most stable environments for the last 30 years because they've had immigrants coming into the city, and then it kept the neighborhood from burning down in that area. And if we stopped thinking about immigrants if we thought of them in a more positive way, we could spread that around the city. That would help. And the idea of all these this sort of white new class of kids coming in, there's a lot of them coming in, but are they going to stay? Are they going to have kids here?
Right.
There's a lot more baby carriages being strolling around the town. A buddy of mine, about 15 years ago, we were standing in front of the Corktown Tavern, and we saw 2 white girls riding their bikes up Michigan Avenue at 2:30 in the morning. And I looked at him, I said, "It's over. we're doomed. We're not going to have any more fun here because now everybody knows what's going on."
That's funny because in the old days, the biggest used to say, if you see a black kid on a bike, it's time to move out.
Yeah.
Now it's sort of the opposite. Now it's sort of the opposite. But I mean, that just cracks me up. But again, it's got a long way to go, but things are happening.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Things are totally happening.
And there's one of the beauties of it is it's a lot of underground stuff. We're not getting at it, I was going to say Applebee's, but I think we got a new Applebee's.
Right.
But we're not getting a tremendous amount of chain stores. That's why I would say find your local bookseller for my books. The idea of shopping within your community is incredibly important because it diversifies and benefits the community. And when you keep that money in the community, then that community
It
benefits
has a multiplier effect because that guy's going to spend that.
Well,
Lawyers are not going to send it to offshore banks.
and then you get to know them. You get to know these people, and they're part of your neighborhood, and that's what makes living fun, and that's what makes Detroit fun. Is when you have friends in your block party again.
It really is. So I take
one of the reasons why Detroit.
Right. When it first grew, annexation was there's always some benefit when you annex.
Right.
Yeah.
No water and.
Well, one of the reasons why Detroit ends at Alta Road was the last fire station that Detroit had.
Wow.
That was about as far as it could go. So when you think about Grosse Pointe Park and Alta Road, Detroit, where that huge divide is, it was based in the 20s or the 10s on whether or not the fire department could service anything north of that. Well, I don't really, I haven't researched or know enough about your neighborhood, but I would say that, like most of anything, if there was economic possibilities for Detroit to assume it, some of those things, communities chose to come in and out. I don't know if your community chose to be a part of Detroit or whether Detroit wanted your community.
No, we were. This was a part of it years ago.
So I think you have the answer.
I think that's the answer. Otis, thanks for your call. You're always perceptive, but we'd like to hear from some other folks too. 313-778-7600. That the whole question of annexation. There are a lot of reasons. The reason Detroit stopped annexing is they're up against county lines and incorporated cities. LA could keep growing. We just kept expanding, and people didn't want to expand. They said, "Okay, well, you won't give me any water then." So.
Well, what's really interesting with the legislature and the Republicans and DeVos and all this, there was this whole thing about condensing, annexing the township fire, public safety, and stuff. But there's this whole idea of you have to have competition and diversity in education, in terms of public and private. It's instead of consolidating you have 15 charter schools with all these different superintendents. You're wasting a ton of money on all these things.
We have 550 school districts in the state. We need about 300. But for example, this is not Detroit. The city of Clawson. Clawson isn't really big enough. They should be merged with Royal Oak or Troy or divided, but then somebody wouldn't get to be the Clawson superintendent.
Right. Well, this whole idea of annexation, and consolidation, it can go into any number of different areas.
Now, unfortunately, Detroit, in which I was a little kid, probably had 2 million people. It's now at 672,000. Mayor Bing thought we ought to sort of have, move the population in, sort of abandoned areas. It would be urban agriculture or something. He didn't really say. How do you feel about that?
In terms of moving,
do you think that you like the urban agriculture movement?
I think Detroit needs to find its own creative answers to these problems, and each, what's really interesting. George Jackson who ripped down Tiger Stadium, and a lot of these buildings, DGC or some of these people have torn a lot of buildings down, or the building land bank is ripping a lot of these buildings down. If you notice. Midtown or Michigan Avenue or some of these areas which are really coming up, it's the buildings that are still here that are being occupied first. There's not a lot of new construction for these storefronts. These people are coming in, they're scrapping
and I think this is a good
hustling.
Thing. Look out in the suburbs in Southwood, for example. They have all these vacant storefronts, and then they're building new ones.
Well, the idea
of filling in.
The mentality of development has been like 10 years behind this. The city has followed the suburban lead,
right?
So they would clear these places out, and instead of trying to secure these buildings until they were functional again, and so you've lost some of this essence of the street living. As you go up and down 2nd Avenue or 3rd Avenue now,
right.
all those abandoned buildings or empty buildings are being renovated. And, now finally they're starting to build a couple new buildings. Liz Bondi just put an addition on hers.
But when I first taught there's a guy and a woman living on a mattress in a vacant lot.
That was my brother.
That was one of my relatives, frankly, but they're probably in the city council now. But at any rate, we've had massive change. But as an artist, it intrigues me. Do you think Detroit could be doing even more to attract artists? Is that a big part of the future of the city?
I think what Detroit needs is people that love Detroit.
Right.
And there's no. Anytime you try and top down something, it doesn't necessarily grow the way you want it to, and it's got to grow organically, and the seeds need to be.
The Central Committee says we will grow this way, comrade. That doesn't seem to work for you.
Yeah, no, it's the idea is that we try. The people I want in Detroit are the people who want to be here.
Right.
And I don't want people here who aren't committed to it, or, and it's a weird thing. It's a city. But this is what's weird about Detroit that other cities don't have. I mean, we're very territorial. We're passionate about our city when it's just a place. The idea of Detroit, though, for me, you need the people that are like that want to be here, that want to work hard, but also want to be nice to people.
Right.
We need to all get along and help each other.
The Detroiters appreciate people who are nice to them, as you said.
Yeah.
Where do you see Detroit? This is an unfair question, an impossible question. Where do you see Detroit in 20 years?
At a Lions Super Bowl parade.
Now there is a leap of faith.
We got 20 more years to wait.
Well, it's only been 61 years.
1957.
But you never know. What are some of your favorite quotes from things people say about Detroit?
Let me add this one point about what I see from Detroit in the next 20 years. I'm going to go back to the long history since the 1850s. The iron stoves, which were created an environment for heating and cooking, transformed the way people lived in cities and in the West. And then you have the auto industry. It's always been technology driven. Detroit has been a leader in technology for 150 years. We never really recognize it. We always think of automobiles as rust buckets or whatever. But the idea of the technology that goes into those things is so important.
We invented the 20th century right here in Detroit.
Basically, we have. And the idea of that, I think, is going to continue as long as people are allowed to stay creative here and contribute. And that's a dynamic that Detroit really brings to the world. And in terms of my favorite quotes, there's just so many, but a lot of them, there's certain sections. One of them is sports. And one of my favorite sections in the sports section is all the Lions. And there's 20 years of just pitiful remarks of failure, which I adore.
The famous one that Tom Landry said about the Lions? Tom Landry was the coach of the Dallas Cowboys back when they were the big Super Bowl. I remember one year they were playing the Lions, and the Lions won. It was a huge upset. They won. They had a touchdown at the end of the fourth quarter. And afterwards, the game film showed the Lions had an extra man on the field. And they asked Landry, "Are you going to protest?" He said, "In my opinion, anytime the Lions are within a touchdown of you, it should be considered a loss."
There's a great Alex Karras quote that sort of sums it up. The hilarity of the Detroit Lions and the way they're fun. He got banned from football with Paul Horning for a year.
Right.
He came back to the 50-yard line the next year, and the ref looked at him. And he says, "Heads or tails, Alex?" And Alex looked at the ref and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I'm not allowed to bet."
Alex Karras used to hold court at the famous Lindell AC.
Yeah.
All these characters, and there's a nostalgia. I'm struck there's nostalgia in Detroit, or maybe it's nostalgia by suburbanites for Detroit that used to be, for all these buildings that weren't here and all of that. But we still have plenty of stuff left.
Well, it's surprising because, like the Jewelers building was going to be torn down.
Right.
The city wanted that out of here. This train station, they wanted it out of here.
Right.
And look at what's happening.
Right.
This majestic architecture, which identifies our city. And when you go to Philadelphia, you go to New York, you go to Kansas City, one of the things that tourists talk about is the architecture of these places.
Right.
And when we're shredding them, and we've done that since the 60s,
right.
That's a loss.
I told down old Detroit City Hall, the preservation groups were fighting to save it.
Yeah.
They had it torn down before it happened.
And the Wayne County, why is Wayne County not in the Wayne County building? It's insane to me, but the idea of these buildings are as important as the history or the way people are. These things define us. These are elements in time that define what we were as a place or a position at that moment.
Right.
And when you look at the Fisher Building, that screams wealth. And in the 20s, Detroit was super rich.
There are actually supposed to be 3 Fisher buildings.
Yeah.
Another one like that, and one twice as tall, but the Great Depression intervened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm got a book that I'm trying to do also about that, where you sort of build your own city out of things that were, things that are, and things that were planned. Because the amount of architecture that we've lost is almost as much as we still have.
It's a tragedy. Then you mentioned Tiger Stadium. Well, that was torn down because the Illiches insisted it be torn down. They were petrified somebody else would put a team in there, but that was part of our history for a sacred ground for baseball.
Well, I don't.
There's a sense in which baseball is a religion, unlike other sports. And the people who renovated, there's a group called the Navy Field Grounds Crew that took care of that site.
The name Rouge is part of that crew.
Oh, good. And you may know then that they would come in the morning and people would have scattered the ashes of their dead ones where home plate used to be, because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be scattered at Tiger Stadium.
Well, the DGC wanted to put a Walmart there or a Kroger's.
Exactly.
And
at least they stopped that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and at that point, it was just the old Navy Field, the dugouts. Now, if you could have these little league kids running through the old dugouts, because they just built a new facility exactly where the old one was.
They did.
It's retarded.
Yes, they could have renovated the old one, but we need progress, don't we?
Yes.
313-778-7600. I want to take a call from Dave. Dave, we got just a couple minutes left. What would you like to say or ask?
Hey, I was just going to say, Detroit's probably one of the first or one of the best international cities ever. And my family, on both sides of the family, they've all lived they came to Detroit. They've been in Detroit since the late 1800s, and everybody just loves it. A lot of them are spread out, to the suburbs and stuff. There's still a couple of us that live in the city limits, but we all consider this our city. We love it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right.
That's true. Well, Dave Krieger, do you remember Detroit's Latin motto?
Yeah. E pluribus unum.
No.
From the ashes we rise?
When the ashes resurgent genericus, when the ashes we lie, and maris meliora, we hope for better things.
Yes.
And I hope for more. Speaking of better things, what's your next great artistic project?
Oh, God. Who knows? We're Chris Turner and I are working on some more video projects. And I've got a couple more books in mind.
Well, keep us in mind. If you got time Sunday afternoon, go down to the Detroit Public Library at 2:30 and listen to this very fascinating man read from these 2 very fascinating books and break down and buy one. The book publishing industry needs you. Actually, buy 2.
I need you too.
We have to support struggling and starving artists wherever we can. Dave Krieger, I admire your work very much. Thanks for making time to come in with us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Good luck to you and keep us posted.